Well, thank you for being here. Again, we get a little double up with the Christmas at the end of the week. But, remember that every day of the octave of Christmas we celebrate as if it's Christmas. So whatever ways you're able to make those more prayerful and more focused on our faith, that's a great blessing. The theme always, I think, of the different perspectives that we bring to this Feast of the Holy Family are worth mentioning every year, but I'm going to kind of focus on a couple different things in the main theme. But we know we start by just honoring Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, and this incredible community that ultimately is responsible for the salvation of the world. And we can't emphasize that enough. The honor we owe to them and the gratitude for their work, and certainly example as well. And I always say that this is a moment that Joseph gets pulled into the focus. Remember, the beginning of the octave, we celebrate Jesus. The end, we celebrate Mary, Mother of God. And again, when I create my own liturgical calendar someday that you guys have to follow, I would possibly throw a Feast of St. Joseph in here, but for now, this is his moment, right? He gets pulled in with the honoring and recognizing he had such a significant role in bringing salvation to us through his role with Jesus and Mary. And it also reminds us, but beyond that, of our call to community, this call to live out our life, our faith in community. And we know that first community, that most central community that we experience is family. Now, for some of us, that might still be an intact community that is a focal point for us. For others of us, it might not. And then that, as I mentioned at the beginning of Mass, we remember that it extends then to the church family, that we're part of this community. We're not just called to live out our life of faith in isolation, but in community. So it's certainly, and knowing that when we do that, whether it's in family, it's in church, whether it's just in our workplace and in our neighborhoods and our social circles, that we are reflecting the image and likeness of God, who is what? Trinity, a community of persons in love, the community of divine persons in love. When we live as a community of persons in love, we are reflecting that, human persons reflecting the divine. So those are always good things just to remember in the connections here. But the thing that I was struck by this year was the way that the very cycles of life, and most of that's experienced in the context of family, are really God's providential and wise way of helping us to grow in the ways that we're supposed to at the different stages of our life. If we could really learn the lessons of each chapter spiritually that we are experiencing physically, we would be in a great place, I believe. And so what am I talking about? At the beginning of life, we are so dependent on our family, our parents. We couldn't survive without them, literally, to feed us, to shelter us. If we could remember that spiritual dependence we have on God our Father throughout our life and realize we're just like those little babies that can't do anything without their parents. We can't do anything without the Father. If, obviously when we're children, we can't learn that spiritual lesson as effectively, but now as adults, for those of us who are adults, to look back and say, can I learn that lesson? Can I grow and realize my dependence on God and Him alone? And then we are called, and many of us maybe were called to that vocation of being parents. But even if we weren't, we were called to beget life, right? That's what Abraham's told in faith. This isn't just about generation physically, but it's about generation in love. And so even if we weren't called to parenthood, like I was not, I'm still called to generate life through my spiritual family and the ways that I support our community. And so all of us, whether single or widowed or whatever places we may find ourselves that aren't in the context of having children, maybe we're married but not able to have children. How is God calling me to generate life? beyond just that bringing life in the world. So that as adults, that we're reminded that discipleship, in another way to say it, of our childhood dependence and following of God the Father, depending on him, now comes to an apostleship of begetting, of bringing life, of being sent. And so of living outside of ourselves. So the one is kind of the spiritual dependence on God, but then the other is this selflessness. We have that broken tendency to be self-centered. Parenting, I've seen it happen over and over with my friends, my family members. They tend to be guys, and I'm not, no knock on the guys here, but sometimes we as guys need to be pulled out of ourselves a little more, strenuously than women that I think have more of a knack for that. But that parenting that forces us to live sacrificial love. I think there's such a wisdom in that. So whether we've had children and that was forced out of us, or hopefully we in our single life, we gave our life to the church, to our extended family, our elderly parents, whatever whoever it is that I've given my life away as a parent would for their child. It pulls us out of ourselves. So that stage of saying it's not about me, it's about others, the most fulfilling way Jesus showed us to live is to live for others, not for ourselves. And that's very clearly in the context of family, but I think there's such a wisdom to it. To be parents, we have to live for that child. And again, if we didn't have children, for those others that we've given our life for, intentionally. And then as we come to the last stage of life, we almost, for some of us as we get older, we can become more like those children we were at the beginning. And now, and this is a transition, and I experienced this in our own family with my mom. I think mothers, because they have such that instinct for nourishing and providing and loving their children, it's a very hard transition for them to accept that love and that service of their family, of their children, and not wanting to be a burden, whatever it is. And I've had those talks with my mom. Mom, you receive it. Don't fight it. Let your family, let your community, let your spouse serve you and love you. It's okay. And there can be some pride in there. And we talked about that. That doesn't, that resists that. And that can be the case for us as men as well. Can we channel that last chapter to God's grace in saying, Lord, what is God wanting to bring from that? Being stripped of my dependence on this world. Being stripped of my need to be independent in this world. Being stripped of my need to be able to do physically what I used to be able to do, or be in the home that I always lived in. And again, I know this is much more difficult than I can imagine. But can we channel that and let God use that in perfecting us, drawing us home to Him forever? And so I think those chapters of life, and then in many times in the context of family life, that God can do such powerful things if we can learn the lessons of each chapter and really try to channel the challenges and sacrifices that they require to our spiritual growth. And I think certainly that's the beauty and wisdom of our God in the context of our human journey, but certainly that journey that involves family very often. So I hope whatever stage you're at or wherever we are, we can make sure to learn those lessons that we've gotten to, whether they were in the past as those children depending on others, whether they were in our adult life as nurturing and providing sacrificial love for others, and then in our last chapter, the end of life, our ability to kind of let God strip us of these earthly things so that we can be His and His alone. And I think in doing that, we can really learn the lesson of the Holy Family and what they were able to live, possibly even without those extensive chapters, because of that grace of the Holy Spirit that was so evident in them, and hopefully can be evident in all of us.